Hello and welcome back to the Colin Cadmus podcast. This is episode number 6, and I'm extremely excited for today's guest, Brendon Cassidy. Brendon graduated from St. Mary's College of California, started his career in recruiting, then transitioned into sales, where he eventually landed himself at LinkedIn in 2005 as employee number 15 and LinkedIn's first ever head of sales. Brendon's next move was one that I would say changed his life forever. He went to work for Jason Lemkin as the VP of sales at Echosign, which was eventually acquired by Adobe for an estimated $400 million. After Echosign, Brendon went on to be the VP of sales at Talkdesk, now valued at over $3 billion, then started his own consulting firm, Cassidy Ventures, where he helped found Gong, and most recently co-founded CoSell.io, where he works as the co-CEO. He's a frequent speaker at SaaStr and other large events, but today we've got him here to share his story firsthand. Brendon, I'm excited to have you in, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Colin. Looking forward to it.
Likewise, man. I've seen you speak at SaaStr a couple times. We've obviously interacted a few times on LinkedIn, but and I think we had a phone call probably like almost a year ago at this point when I first started at Aircall. Actually, more than a year, maybe 2 years now. But this is the first chance to really sit down and get to know you and hear your story firsthand. So kind of like to just start out with the simple, like, how'd you get into sales? I believe you started in recruiting, right? And then moved into sales. So what was that like? You started out in recruiting. How'd you land in that job? And then what made you decide to make the switch to go into sales? Not that they're entirely different.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Bay Area. So I grew up out here. So obviously I knew what the tech sort of scene was like. You're talking back 20 years ago, essentially, right? So that was pre-dot-com bubble bursting, which is an era that actually not a lot of people that you meet in tech today were in tech at that point yet. But it was, it was a pretty like frothy time for tech. There were, a lot of startups, a lot of IPOs, a lot of IPOs for companies that were not making much money, if any. And so, it was like tech was sort of, if you wanted to be in the game in the Bay Area, tech was probably where it was going to be. And so a friend of mine worked for this company called OTech, which was a recruiting firm in San Francisco. Actually a guy named Matt Strand that I've known since I was 2. So there are local connections and networks in the Bay Area. Obviously, you have a lot of people here who are not from here.
Right.
I came in. It was a really young group. Everyone was like, 20 to 20, 22 to 25 sort of range. And probably about 6 or 7 months after starting is when the dot-com bubble collapsed. And, so that was like my introduction to, it's kind of a career introduction. Certainly my introduction to tech was like, literally going from like the highest of highs as far as like, just how kind of easy it was to like, like a apocalyptic sort of, fallout, which is really what, when people talk about how difficult the pandemic, this period has been, which has been difficult for a lot of people, right? If not professionally, personally for a lot of people. And so, but they asked me, economically, like compare the sort of pandemic period and the dot-com bubble bursting. Well, the dot-com bubble bursting was like, that was the worst thing that's ever happened in the tech space in my lifetime.
You're talking like 2008 around there?
No, that's
before then.
I'm talking 2001, 2002, 2003. Literally where there was, obviously you and I were chatting a little bit about the sort of exodus from sort of San Francisco.
Yeah.
I would say the city more than the Bay Area, but there have been a lot of people that have left. Nothing compared to 2002, 2003 timeframe. Literally almost every person I knew in San Francisco just packed up and
but that actually makes sense, right? Because we were just talking about how you're being very pro, stay in California, it's going to come back. But now that gives some context, like you've kind of seen the worst of this, play its course before.
Yeah, it was literally just like, and and that's when they talk about San Francisco. San Francisco, Silicon Valley was traditionally the sort of center of the tech scene, right? Which is not San Francisco.
Right.
Silicon Valley is, generally, broadly speaking, 30 to 60 minutes south of San Francisco. But the dot-com bubble was really the first time the city emerged as sort of like where a lot of these startups and companies were founding. And then it just all went away, like literally just, from like max capacity, trillions of investment dollars flowing into the San Francisco startup scene to just,
Nothing.
Commercial real estate vacancies, right, left, center.
Yeah.
And so, and that's why, it's a lot of the people that are saying it's the end of the Bay Area, the end of the Valley. They haven't been here even long enough to have been through it. Like a single.
How long did it take to recover from it back then?
It was a while. As far as the tech space in general, I would say sort of LinkedIn, Facebook, right, which were 2004, 2005, as far as their emergence.
Right.
That was really where, you started to see sort of an upward swing in the market. And really it was the learning from the dot-com bubble bursting was companies were much more pragmatic about their revenue models and their growth models and sustainability, profitability, even in some cases, although not a lot of people, profitability is not a super popular word these days in tech. But yeah, companies were going out literally in 2000. I think there was a company called Web Methods that went out at like 25 million in revenue, annual revenue, right? Think about how crazy that is, right? And so now you see most companies really going out at like 150, 200 or more in revenue, right? So just how companies are growing, go-to-market models, distribution models, all those things, those were really just sort of neophyte concepts back then. So it's changed a ton. But yeah, there was a 3 to 4 year reckoning. Wow. In which if you wanted to be in the tech space, like you had to think, it was not a no-brainer in any way.
Right. Certainly not like it is today or has been in the last few years. So
and the dot-com bubble bursting is also what helped facilitate the cloud as a viable business model, right? Because the number of CIOs and sort of Fortune 1000 executives that were buying enterprise on-premise customized software back in late 90s into 2000, that became that became such an overt risk to their livelihoods. I'm going to go buy software.
Was so significant.
What's that?
Because the investment is so significant to do.
Yeah, you were investing a lot of money that you couldn't. There was no pulling back.
Right.
So you were investing in products, and then all of a sudden, 4 to 5 months later, these companies were bankrupt. Right. And like, hey, like our supply chain is now, our supply chain is now run on this highly customized on-premise enterprise software deployment that for a company that's no longer in business. And so the cloud
and they can't move fast with that stuff either, right? The on-prem, like the way that software gets updated today, like it could never happen at that speed with on-prem.
Yeah, I mean, there's the benefits of SaaS versus enterprise or on-premise is there's certainly many benefits to it, but the catalyst was hey, we want to be able to build and sell software to people without risking the life of the person buying it, right? Give them a way to to test it or to buy a subset of licenses or subscriptions before they go all in. And that's really how the cloud came to be, right? Like, Salesforce is like, hey, you don't need to go spend $5 million with Siebel or Oracle or whatever it is, right? Just, and that was their, sort of bottom up strategy, if you want to call it that.
Makes a ton of sense. So
what was the original question?
It's how you got into sales, right? So it sounds like, you're going through this .com burst and then, LinkedIn sort of becomes on the horizon for you. How did that happen? And I guess, did you have any sense of like how big of a deal LinkedIn would be at the time?
Sure. I was kidding. No, nobody did. I had a sense that it was that there was the raw materials could be amazing, but like nobody was walking around being like, LinkedIn is a no brainer, like
No one
no.
thought it was the next like social media platform. It was like a resume job seeking. It was kind of new. It was kind of cool, but it wasn't.
It was
like
what's your revenue model? That was when people talked about LinkedIn. They're like, oh, is that the company that spams me with invitations to connect or whatever it is, right? And then like, okay, well, what's the revenue model, right? If you talked about, how many users were joining every day or whatever it is, it was questions around like that there's no real viable sort of business model around it.
Right. Which was similar to Facebook when they started.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, you just made me
different
remember
that. Facebook obviously was always ads. Facebook was always going to be driving sort of an advertising revenue model. LinkedIn did not become LinkedIn on the backs of an advertising revenue. When I started, that was the assumption, right? We're going to grow through ads the way Facebook did. But advertising never, sort of the corporate solution side always outperformed the advertising side generally.
It makes sense because the data and the access is so powerful that it's so valuable. I mean, when you look at what people pay to use LinkedIn, it's crazy, right? When you look at companies, the amounts they're spending, but like we do it without thinking twice.
Yeah, certainly from a recruiting solution standpoint, they've and
LinkedIn the sales navigator too.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, I don't know that I would say LinkedIn has been a disruptor there in the same way they've been in recruiting.
I agree.
The recruiting landscape, LinkedIn really decimated.
I guess you're right. You have to have it for recruiting.
Yeah, because when I was starting there, that was what we were like. Hey, think we could sell something into recruiting? That was kind of like that's why I was hired to figure that out.
To figure that out. Background. So they come to you. Well, walk me through that. So how did you meet them? Like, what was that first conversation? Who came to you, and what was the ask?
Yeah, so there's an intermediate step. So obviously, I was recruiting, which was that's its own podcast session. I
imagine that the recruiting was like it's your first job. You're getting out of school. You're learning a bunch of stuff, and like you're getting your feet wet.
I mean, my recruiting experience is really the foundation of my career, and like that established everything else that came after it in every way. And still today, like there's tons of things I learned as a recruiter and in recruiting that I do every day, almost like,
So was it largely, I guess it was largely your recruiting experience that made sense for them to look at you for this role?
So really my first job after recruiting, right? So through recruiting, I had built, we'd built a great network of people, right? So I went to this company called Spoke Software, introduced by Aaron Ross, by the way.
Oh, was it?
Aaron Ross introduced me to the VP of sales for this company called Spoke Software. So Spoke was funded at the same time as LinkedIn, literally, like. And so there was a sort of kind of manufactured rivalry between the founder of Spoke and Reed as like which of these companies is going to make it. Now Spoke's model, it was basically two different data sets. One was LinkedIn, opt-in, it's dynamic, people own their own data, right? And so it keeps the data super fresh. Spoke was trying to like aggregate data through email, right?
Okay.
And so they really weren't competitors, but they were sort of built up to be competitors. But again, it was essentially data, right? It was people data. So it's like the beginning of that sort of space in general, right? Which is now, a real category, I'd say.
Yeah.
But so they were viewed to be competitors. We did well, but we didn't have a product that was going to scale like LinkedIn. Didn't have the virality LinkedIn had. And so, LinkedIn reached out to me and they're like, yeah, we think we want to launch something in recruiting. Obviously your background, given that you were Spoke, which was again, identified pretty closely with LinkedIn at that point. Not many people will recollect this, by the way, today, that the Spoke and LinkedIn had sort of early parallel paths. And then, she reached out to me. She cold called me, actually, believe it or not.
Who was it? I was actually wondering, was it Jeff who reached out to you or did they have someone else?
Well, Jeff was years later. Didn't come into LinkedIn.
Oh, that's right. That's
yeah.
right. For some
And
reason, I
so,
always think he's the founder, but that
no,
God, you're right.
no, Reed's the founder. Reed's the founder and the visionary and all that stuff. But it was a woman named Tara Terwilliger, and she had brought it. She came in to be the GM of LinkedIn Jobs. That's what it was sort of called at that point. And then I met with them, got offered the job, turned the job down.
Really?
Yeah, because Spoke promoted me and all that. Obviously they wanted to keep me there. And so I was like,
and LinkedIn, for context for everyone, this is 15 people person company at this time, right?
15 to 20, whatever it was.
Right. In that ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I'm like, yeah, just, that, what a master stroke by me. Right. I'm like, I just leveraged LinkedIn to get promoted to Spoke. And so, maybe a month later, literally it was like 10 o'clock at night. I'm in the office by myself. I was single back then, right? It's not like I had that many better things to do. And I'm looking at the Spoke data set side by side with the LinkedIn data set. And I was just like, yeah, we can't compete against this. And these guys aren't even trying to compete against us. And so I reached out to Tara. She was not there anymore. She had already left LinkedIn. And so her email sort of auto directed to a woman named Sarah Imbach, who was really kind of LinkedIn's COO in the early years and was a hugely influential person in the company's history, hugely. LinkedIn's probably not LinkedIn if Sarah was not there. She was like Reed's right hand. She was the operational foundation of the company.
Got it.
And she's like, well, Tara's not here anymore, but I'm still interested. And I had met her in the original interview as I had met Reed. So I came back in and said, okay, well, obviously I've been promoted as Spoke, so I need, this is the title I need. Which is pretty, obviously I was young at that point, but yeah, they said, okay, let's do this. And at that point, I was really, because Tara had left, I was really the person that started LinkedIn Jobs for all intents and purposes at that point, that's what LinkedIn Corporate Solutions is.
Right.
And really at that point, we were not expected to be the primary revenue driver at all. The thought to be primary revenue driver was going to be advertising. Right. Because that's what Facebook's business model was on. And that's what most consumer internet companies were based on. And so there really weren't a lot of like historical references to our business model, right? Which was like, hey, we had advertising, we had jobs, we had online revenue. And so it really just became like like kind of a race to relevance,
Right.
And so
how did you approach it? What was sort of like, did you immediately land on this idea, or was there a bunch of iteration? Did you try like different things before you landed on?
It was really just as far as like what LinkedIn Jobs became or what LinkedIn Recruiter was. I mean, so there were definitely recruiters that used like the free product, right? But like it didn't really occur to them that, this was anything that you would pay for.
Right.
And so really we just were like, let's just, literally this is like in a whiteboard, where we're
the free product, I imagine it probably had more free features than it does today.
Yeah, it really didn't have anything, to be frank, right? It had some in-mail, some introductions. We had sort of the job, sort of.
But I guess let me rephrase that. Like today, LinkedIn does a great job restricting what you can do if you're not paying. Were you as a sales leader? I imagine like coming in, like you probably didn't have all of that there because it's not built yet, and that makes it harder. I don't think people realize. So
there was you couldn't pay for. There was no paywall around data, right? Which was,
you had to convince people to buy it before they were being blocked, from sending too many requests or whatever. Yeah.
Not only was there was no paywall around the data, but there was no difference between the online product and the, sort of corporate product, right? So we were basically just taking things that were already available you could buy for like, $40, $29.99 a month on the website. Yeah. And we were just cobbling it together to create say this is the solution. And then, obviously we were reaching out to like, recruiting leaders, VPs of recruiting, VPs of talent. And we were saying, and at that point, Monster, Hot Jobs, Career Builder, those were the dominant players in the space. And we were like, games changed, right? like you can't sit back and wait for active job seekers. You need to go out and aggressively recruit top talent, right? And top talent is not sending you resumes on hot jobs, right? And so that was the entire like sort of 50,000 foot message, right? Which is the best recruiting organizations in the world prioritize passive talent, right?
Right.
Passive job seekers, which actually wasn't even true, right? I mean, like, if you had a LinkedIn profile, you were hypothetically a passive job seeker, but most weren't, right?
Right.
But really, it was just sort of framing the narrative, and we sort of tapped into, recruiting and HR is often treated like the redheaded stepchild in a lot of companies, right?
Yep.
Like they're treated like non-value added sort of members of the team a lot.
They're just expected to get it done.
Yeah, a lot of hiring managers at that point didn't respect internal recruiters, right? And I knew this from my recruiting days because I was the agency guy,
right,
that was trying to get around corporate recruiting to hiring managers, right? And so, and that obviously was a useful reference point, but like, yeah, that's what we were like, hey, this is your chance to shine in your organization. And so, I mean, obviously that's a pretty broad message, but like, it was just everything we talked about, right? Which was like, like eliminate sort of third-party recruiting fees, get off Monster, get off hot jobs. That's for, that's so 5 years ago, right?
Right. So can you talk a little bit about the revenue growth, like in the first year? Can you give sort of some milestones roughly, like what you guys got to at the end of the first year?
Yeah, I think we went from like 0 to 10 as far as like just LinkedIn corporate solutions.
Right.
In like 16 months, something like that.
0 to 10 million in 16 months?
Maybe roughly 18 months. I could go, like it's a while ago, right?
Either way, like that's extreme success.
Yeah. We were just upset. Honestly, we were like, LinkedIn was a consumer internet company, right? That was what the mindset of the company was, which is very much like a field of dreams mindset, right? If you build it, they will come.
Right.
And like very much, hey, we don't need to sell this, right? Just build something great and they'll come to us, kind of thing. And so we had to earn respect in the company, right? A lot of people were not super down for LinkedIn having a sales organization. I won't name any names, but some of them are out actively pushing Miami as the new tech destination. They did not want us to have a sales team, and they were openly sort of derisive of it, to be frank.
Is that because they thought it would have a bad sort of stigma on the brand, pushing people to spend money? Or
there was no historical examples of consumer internet companies that were building like sort of an enterprise sales model on top of it,
Right.
Not many. I mean,
which is what's so exciting about LinkedIn's business today.
That's what was truly unique about it, right? But it was like there wasn't a lot of that. There was no prior examples, so it was all we were figuring it out,
right?
And so there were some people that were like, did not like us very much, and so we were like this, sort of scrappy team in the corner, right?
Well, but it sounds like if you got fast success too, that probably just poured fuel on that fire, right? Because then you're getting all the attention.
And so we went from like the scrappy underdogs. I mean, it was a great experience, right? Because it was like we were not the like people weren't throwing like rose petals at our feet, right? Like, so we, the stars of the company were on the product and the development side, which is fine, which is great. And many of those people are like,
fine. Yeah,
they were very good friends of mine and still are.
I mean, I've seen that in many companies, and I've seen it more in like, there's some animosity towards sales when they're just doing really well and they get all the attention. I wouldn't
say it was animosity. It was curiosity.
Okay.
It was like, seeing something in the wild that you'd only heard about,
right.
And so it was more that, and they were like, what is this sales thing? I'm like, gosh,
what was the sales floor like? Like, what was the culture of the sales floor? Was it Were you guys like loud, standing up on the phones? Was it more of a quiet, reserved office? What was it like in there at that
I
time?
would say we were pretty collaborative and open, and so we were, it was actually, we were they had cubes in this office. It was in Palo Alto, across from Palo Alto Municipal Golf Course. So it was like, it wasn't like it wasn't like downtown Palo Alto, or I guess downtown Newark as a reference for you. But,
Okay.
yeah, it was, we were a super tight knit group. We were, we sort of created our own culture because, we didn't have a sort of the broader culture to draw on, right? Because the rest of the company was pretty much focused on other stuff, right? They were focused on building features that would drive engagement and
Right.
clicks, and, and people stay on the site longer. And so
Were you able
there was
to?
no. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, were you able to?
Yes.
Were you able to get good resources from tech as a sales leader? Like
Not
when you
in
had
the
ideas
no.
and things? No.
Not in the beginning. No, we had no resources from tech. We didn't really have any resources from marketing either. So
You had to prove it, figure it out yourself,
yeah,
basically.
and obviously we had, the LinkedIn network was enough,
Right.
And so there was a bounty there, and so obviously quickly we earned, a lot of credibility, and we were, there was a guy that ran the ad sales side, and I ran the corp sales side, and my
Were you
goal
guys
was just
competitive?
well, I don't know how competitive he felt with me, but I felt competitive with him, which, in a healthy way.
That's
right?
good. Yeah, that's good.
But that's pretty much been the case for me throughout my career. But I wanted to beat him every week, and so we would sit down and walk through, sort of, where were we at for the month, what we were going to close that next week or next month, or we did that every Monday. And so, like, I was, and that was what I told the team. We were going to beat him every week, week after week after week, until they're like, oh yeah, you're, oh, we want to build around you guys.
You need that. You need that kind of fire in a company. So how big did you grow the team?
Essentially from like 0 to 40, 0 to 35, 0 to 40 sort of range.
And you were there, I forget how many years.
About 3 years.
3 years, right? Okay.
But I was the head of sales. I wasn't the VP of sales, which was fine, right? But obviously LinkedIn.
Was there a VP of sales?
What's that?
Was there a VP of sales at the time or no?
There wasn't, but like I was pretty young at that point, right? So like, and then we had a new CEO.
You landed like I said, it's the life-changing role. Like that was the perfect place for you to end up at that stage of your career.
Yeah, LinkedIn was a great, it was, it was an incredible experience. Just because, when you're on the ground, you're there, like, and obviously what LinkedIn became, what it was, even a year after I left was so much different than what it was when I started. But yeah, when you're there on a whiteboard, sort of, nothing else to draw on, just like your own problem solving skills, I guess.
Yeah.
That's, you take that with you and say, I know that I've done that before. I also know that, I also knew that wherever I did it again would probably be harder, because you probably weren't going to have this sort of viral network sort of feeding sort of the enterprise model. But still, right. We were on a whiteboard, just, nobody was like knocking down our door being like, God, I want to buy enterprise software from LinkedIn. Nobody was.
Right. So let's talk about that though. That's an interesting transition into Echosign. So I guess how and why did you decide to leave? And then, walk me through meeting Jason, or, how this all came about.
Yeah. I mean, first off, I felt like, I wanted to be like the VP of sales. Right. So I was like head of sales on LinkedIn. I didn't really know if I was going to, I felt like they viewed me as, this guy's great, and let's go hire somebody, let's go hire an older, more experienced VP of sales that Brendon will roll to. That
makes sense. I mean, you're in your early 20s at this point, right?
Not early 20s, but yeah, I was
late 20s?
Young, certainly, like for that time, and sort of the software, the SaaS space, super young. even to be thought of as a potential VP of sales. And so I had known Jason. We were an early Echosign customer at LinkedIn.
Okay.
So we used the product, and I was like, it's one of the few products I'd ever seen salespeople like, and so I knew him that way. And so I knew, and our paths had crossed a few other ways. And, he reached out to me and he said, I want to, if you'd come, you can come in here. It's your show. You're the VP of sales. And at that point, there weren't a lot of SaaS companies back in 2000. You're talking about 2008, 2009 timeframe.
Yeah.
There really weren't.
Right.
There was probably about 97% less companies.
Yeah, I mean, I was just getting out of college
there
in 08, and it was not like a talked about thing to get into SaaS or software.
Yeah, and so I had really my experience on LinkedIn, it was truly like a VP of sales experience, right? And so I said, I'm going to bet on me here, right? In this case, there will be no doubt if I'm successful that, that I did that kind of thing.
It was all you.
Which is and let's be honest, like personal achievement and ego.
Of course. Yeah, for sure.
It's a motivator early for sure. And so that was sort of my mindset coming in was if I can succeed here and if I can make this happen, at that point I'll never have to, I'm a VP. I'm at least a VP of sales.
Yeah,
or whatever
you're
I do
kind of
beyond.
you've gotten to that point and there's no going back. So walk me through it. So I know for me, right, I did the VP sales thing twice, and I would say my first time was probably more of like a director, head of sales role. It had the VP title, but like it was more similar to what you're talking about, right? And then I went to Aircall to be a VP where I had already done it once before. And so I felt, and I'm curious if you can relate or whatnot, like I felt so much more prepared the second time. And so going into Echosign, I think I kept saying it wrong. Echosign, it's Echosign, right?
It's okay.
So going into there, how did you treat your first 90 days? Like, how did you approach that? Because obviously you achieved enormous success. So I'm curious to really dive in. You've got now the experience from LinkedIn. So like you've learned lessons, you have the foresight to really think about how you're going into this. So what was the game plan going into that job?
Yeah. So when I came in was like a low point for the company. Like, when I started, their first VP of sales was gone.
Okay.
Either having been fired or quit, which is still to this day. And they were
at roughly what in revenue and employees?
Maybe like, I don't know, 1.5 million in ARR or million,
It's early.
Maybe 10 or 11 employees, 2 salespeople, right? So
it's very early.
They had a 10 person sales org, and then 8 of them when the first VP of sales left or was fired.
Yeah.
8 people just up and left, like literally between the time that guy left and when I started, almost everybody left, right? Okay. Left or, again, hazy details as to exactly how it went down.
It wasn't going.
And so there were just 2 salespeople left. There was like the more experienced sort of, like the one rep that had closed all the business kind of deal.
Right.
And there was this other guy, this kid who was like had been sort of like an SDR, was kind of like an SMB sales guy, who was a guy named Sam Blon. Right. And so those were like those were the 2 people. And so really I was.
So morale, let me just try to put my head around this. So you're coming in, morale is probably bad, right? Yeah. People are not, you're not on like that like you're not riding a wave of success right now. People are not in a great mindset. Was this the first and only VP sales they fired, or were there multiple?
That was one, right? Okay. Who'd been there for a year, but like I've written about this, right? Like even if you miss on your first VP of sales, you're never going to get that year back, right?
It's very hard to come back from. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost a blessing that a lot of those reps left and you kind of had a bit of a clean slate. It's a little bit less of like cultural damage to clean up.
That's a good point, right? Because yes, it certainly quickened the, like let's get into the, meat of this. I didn't have to spend a quarter like, oh, let's evaluate the current team and decide
exactly
who should stay or who shouldn't or whatever, right?
Because that's typically the first 90 days. Yeah.
So it helped. And so, yeah, obviously like the first thing they executed very poorly, right? They were running like enterprise, it was everything needed to just get sped up. Right. And they were like slow playing these sales cycles for not very big deals at that point. And so basically,
and I mean, it's a contract software. Like I would imagine the sales cycle, even for a huge account, doesn't have to be that complicated, right?
Yeah. I mean,
yes. With the exceptions of legal and whatever has to happen there, but like you're selling a pretty simple
I
tool.
would say like most of the early customers were more SMB and mid-market, right? So like, again, so it's, long sales cycles just couldn't happen, right?
Yeah. You don't have the time.
And so
for it.
my take was like, why do you have like a 14 stage sales cycle for, when your average deal size is like 5K? Like, I don't understand, right? Like, I don't understand what you're doing. And so really like I came in and I was like, the first thing I need to do is just prove to myself that can we do better than we're doing, to be frank, right? Which is like, can we increase our deal size? Can we speed up our sales cycle? Can we, control?
So how do you approach that? Do you say, all right, I'm going to close a few deals myself? What's the,
I would say my approach is just get in, just partner up with the rep. And at that point it was one of two people.
Yeah.
So partner with one or the other, whoever the rep is. And my approach has always been like, hey, like I'm jumping in, like my job is to help contribute. My job's not to sit there and like in a corner and evaluate you and take note, shake my head or,
Right.
I really wanted them to feel comfortable with me joining them on calls and that it would be helpful or value add. And so that was my take. It's like, yeah, like I'll either be a value add on these calls or I just won't be on them. Right.
And I guess the agenda is mutually beneficial, right? You're telling them, look, the goal is to shorten this sales cycle. So let's work on that.
And so, so like a lot of it was just like, it was, it's hard. People have asked me like, what's your sales philosophy or methodology? And like at some point I should probably like write that down. But like,
don't worry about it.
Basically it was like, we need to show them like production value of the product as quickly as possible, whether that's in a demo or a pilot. You'd rather, if you can show it on a sales call or in a demo, sort of as close to like game time conditions as possible.
Right. Were you guys up against, was it DocuSign was the big one?
Yeah, it was Echosign and DocuSign. It's like, and we were like the less funded, sort of underdog in that fight.
Because they were a little bit earlier than you, right? They started a little earlier?
They started earlier and they raised like $1 billion and we raised $7 million. Right?
What was the thought there? Actually, I've always been curious about this. Like, what was Jason's thought to go build? I don't know the details of the two products. I imagine it's like SalesLoft and Outreach at this point, right? Like, I don't know.
He's a lawyer by trade. Right.
I see. So that's how you get into it.
He went to law school. So he, a lot of his early career was sort of, centered around like contracts, documents, contract and document execution. So that was sort of that, and his wife also a lawyer and attorney. So she's Malin, who's
okay. That brings some context to it. Did he see did he see something wrong with DocuSign that he said, we're going to do better? Or did he see such a big opportunity? They said, we're going to take a piece of that pie.
I would say he didn't get into it because of DocuSign, really, right? DocuSign was not a very like well thought of company at that point, as far as like when he started.
Right.
I would say when I started, obviously DocuSign was more, back in like early 2009, DocuSign was more established certainly at that point. But it was just, I think our feeling was it's just so much white space to run here that like, at this point we don't really need to be obsessed about, one potential competitor.
Yeah. Eventually there's differentiation. And I mean, really there's room for two players anyway.
There was room for room for two players. Yeah. And so, and then as things started, we started doing well and doing better and our deal sizes started going up and we started to get into more consequential deals. Obviously then now we're going head to head.
Right.
And so that was.
And how long did that take for you to get into those larger deals?
It's pretty quick,
Right.
like,
Within a year?
yeah, I would say I mean, we were already in some of those deals, right? But we were not, generally speaking, we weren't really winning them sort of when I came in, I would say, with any regularity. And so, we were like, anytime DocuSign was in the deal against us, we were like, just add attention, it
Right.
was sort of battle stations type of scenario, right? And it was incredibly competitive, right? And that was that person was a great experience for me, right? Because obviously you come from LinkedIn where you have this huge network and sort of all this sort of tailwind, so to speak, and then now you're the underdog, the
Right.
less funded underdog competing against a company that's got more money, more engineers, more features.
It was like me at AirCall up against Talkdesk and Ring Central's
Sure. Yeah.
similar type of. How did you think about that actually? Like, you obviously had to craft, what your pitch was against DocuSign. How did you guys sell against them?
Yeah. So, and that was great. For me, it was a great experience, right? Because, we had to find out what we did. What do we do well?
Right.
What do we do well that we just think is a philosophical difference with DocuSign? And then how do we translate that into how we sell?
Because it's not features, right? I imagine you were in the same boat as me at AirCall, where it's like, we're not going to be able to sell on features. In fact, our competitors had more features. So we had to figure out a different way to be different. And we went down the route of user experience, customer experience, that whole thing.
Yeah. So we felt like the one area that we had, it was the user experience to sign a document, right? Not the all the different things you could do to create a document or modify a document or create sort of different ways or workflows to sign a document. But the one thing we felt like, we were better at was the user experience to sign a document, really, which was really that's the
end product.
Yeah. What is the consumer experience to sign a document, which is your customers, right?
Right.
And so our philosophy was, we can make the sales cycle about that, we're going to win. And if they make the sales cycle about anything other than that, they win.
Right.
And so that's, it was basically like we had one thing going for us, generally speaking.
Yep.
And we leveraged that like to the
it's so relatable for me. Like, it was the same thing at AirCall. We knew we were short on features and stuff, but like the UI was beautiful. And that's what people were so impressed with. So we said, this is what we're going to sell on, that we built this specifically to be the beautiful, simple, minimalist. Yeah.
So basically, our approach was, this is what it's about. This is what our entire narrative's about. We knew exactly how to like deposition all the other things, right?
Yep.
Which was like, it's great. Our joke was like, which is become more important, right? But DocuSign was like, there's all these different ways that you can authenticate a signer. And we would joke about like, we think it's great that they have like, sort of eyeball authentication, like, but in reality, your customers don't really want to sign documents that way, right? And so we had a way to sort of deposition really their entire narrative on the other side. And then we'd say, the only thing that matters here is what is the experience for your customers,
right?
Because when you roll this out, like most of them will probably be signing electronically for the first time ever. So you're going to take a process hundreds of years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
With pen and paper, and you're going to make it entirely an online experience. And it better be intuitive and easy to do the first time, right? And if it isn't, it's a failure, right? And this is, this is the kind of failure people lose jobs over. So that was the narrative, right? We wanted there to be perceived risk in DocuSign, and that their priorities were, it's table stakes what the signing experience is. And we
makes a lot of sense. You found your strength. So for everyone who's listening, when you're in a competitive space, like, it's about finding that strength, and it can be one thing, and you just have to drive it home.
It's about finding your strength and then
their weakness,
making your strength the narrative of the process.
Right.
And like, basically our approach was like, this is, this will be what this sales cycle is about. It's going to be all about this. And
so did you get to, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, did you get to a place within the first year, just for a bit of a timeline, where you felt like your team was no longer perceiving your product as the underdog? Or was it always
No,
you guys still felt that and you were always pushing past that or through that?
I would say post acquisition.
Okay.
There was maybe that feeling amongst some people at Adobe or whatever, right? And if that's the case, that's going to filter in, that's
Right.
going to seep into the mindset somewhat. But no,
It
we were
says a
never.
lot, man. It says a lot because, you know, in hindsight, it's easier to look at Brendon and Jason and say like, oh yeah, they built a huge competitor and, you know, in a big space. But like when you were in that space, you were the underdog, right? Like you were figuring these things out.
We were the underdog, and so yeah, and like you know, the underdog in a company that had been through some adversity, right? Obviously, when I came in when I started was a low point, and right, and so it was like I think everyone in the company felt sort of particular glee, right?
I'll tell you, by the way, I actually think that's not a bad way for a VP to come in because it can really only get a lot better, right? You can make a few changes and people like you pretty quickly. Yeah.
And I've told that to other people, like, hey, like can you do better than the last guy did? And they're like, yes, I'm positive. And they said, great, that probably buys you a year at least, right?
Yeah. The first 90 days is like, how can I fix as many of the things that the last person did that pissed everyone off? If I can fix some of those things, well, I can earn the respect of the team pretty quickly.
Exactly. And you're going to be, a hero to the founder or the CEO for a while, right?
Right. Maybe 6 months.
But never forever. And so, that was like and so I think the company took particular, there was like this, everyone was so bought in, and obviously part of, we weren't like a mass, overfunded, sort of bloated. We were pretty lean, right? We're pretty lean. We were profitable, I would say, within, when I got there, like 2 quarters.
Wow.
Which obviously people try and neg profitability in the software world.
I think there's nothing cooler to be able to brag about,
because nobody owns you at that point, right? Nobody can really fuck with you at that point. So, and so there was like everybody in the company was just loved beating DocuSign, right? That was like because it pissed them off to no end.
It gets so serious. Yeah. I mean, when I was at my first company, Single Platform, we had a competitor, Yext, who you've probably heard of. And we used to do basketball tournaments against Yext. Like we were really, really intense with the competition. Like we actually took it to the streets and would like play basketball against them and stuff. But like we were fired up, and that's what made it really fun. I am curious though, how did you guys handle pricing against DocuSign? Because I imagine that's a big decision. Are you gonna undercut them, which could devalue your product? Are you gonna price it?
I would say it was pretty negligible. Like it was going to generally cost the same either way.
Okay.
And like,
so you intentionally said we do not want to undercut on price. If that was your decision, I have to think that you made that conscious.
Yeah, I mean,
decision.
we didn't always know, right? We didn't always know exactly where we stood from a pricing standpoint against them, but
it wasn't your marketing strategy to say like we're less expensive.
No,
right.
You can't win. Like
it's a bad idea. That's why I asked.
You can't win
successfully. That's the easy choice to make.
Just because it's cheaper, right? Like that's just, maybe in like an incredibly transactional model, right? Where it's just,
I think you can win short term, that you can get some market share, but long term, I don't think you're going to win that way.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we were probably like, I don't know, a little bit less from a pricing standpoint, but like, I just don't think that would, like
it wasn't your sales pitch, basically.
No, it wasn't. And like, that's a learning from early in my career, right? That like my early jobs before I was ever a sales leader, like when I was even before LinkedIn, I was in startups and we would do like swap deals, right? And stuff like that. And I became like the biggest anti-swap person ever, really, kind of like, because it's just so not sustainable,
Yeah.
It's not, it's like a false, it's a false win, essentially. That was the feeling I had.
It makes sense.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, cause we're running up on time, I think soon, but what was it like working for Jason Lemkin? Like, for everyone in the audience, obviously I think everyone probably knows who he is. He's the godfather of SaaS in my mind. Right.
Yeah.
What was it like working with him? Did it, I guess what I'm curious to ask is, like, when you were working with him, was he this SaaS expert, or did he have this revelation after all of this success?
Yeah, he did. I mean, he was like, he definitely had like a vision, like how are things going to play out, like over, 6, 12, 18 months. And he was right about those things pretty much all the time. So I would say like him and Jason and Reed are like pretty similar in that way, right? As they had this sort of like superpower to sort of just map out how it's going to play out.
So
Like,
they had
what
a
are all
good
these?
pulse on
Yeah,
what
like
was
what are
coming.
all these things we're doing today? These small things we're doing today. How do they fit into the bigger picture? And that's helpful for a startup, right? Because
Yeah.
you have to be able to see the forest from the trees, or whatever you want to say. So
What about
he was
like his
great at,
management style with you? I guess to give a little tactical advice to the other CEOs and VPs out there. Like, I know for me in both of my VP roles, it was very different the way I was managed by my CEO. Some pros, some cons either way. But what was his style? I mean, were you meeting together every day? Was he very hands off, and it was like every week
yeah,
you
we
update
were. I
him?
mean, we were in a, see where you're sitting right there. There was a loft in our building,
Okay.
like over your right shoulder, and it was up above, and so that's where Jason was, right?
Got it.
So he couldn't like see my monitor or something, right? But like if I said, "Hey, Jason," he would, "Yeah, what's up?" you know.
Got
So
it.
he
So,
was right
so
up
you
there,
were
and so
you were
yeah,
at
so
that small sort of
yeah,
that where the company's still one team essentially. Like,
in our first building, we had like one side of the building was where like sales and marketing and Jason were, and then the other side is
right.
where the dev team was, right?
Got it.
It's I'm not encouraging people to split up sales and dev or anything, but
I mean, it's pretty natural anyway. From what I've seen, no one
but
wants
he
to sit near
was, I mean, he was
salespeople.
incredible. He was incredibly supportive. He was, you know, he, everything he was doing was trying to help me and help us be successful. Never any real drama. And sort of some people had sort of pegged him as difficult to work with before, and he just never was for me, right? And I think, that like I said, that was a low point when I came in, right? And
Yep.
he was making his bet was me. He was making a bet on me. It wasn't like, you know, the board was split on me, by the way, right? Because they were like, "Who's this?"
The
Let's go
board's
hire
always split
someone.
on everyone,
Yeah,
by the
let's
way.
go hire someone older, right?
Right.
And Jason was like, "No, my Brendon is the person I'm betting on, and like his success will be our success, and if he fails, you can I'll take whatever the consequences are," which would have been Jason stepping out as CEO, right?
Right. Well, and
And
he
so,
was
of
right,
course, I
and
didn't know all that, by the way. So that
probably
was for
better
the
that you
best.
didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't come in with that sort of understanding of what that looked like, and so yeah, I mean that's the best advice I can give a CEO and a founder is just total support um, for your VP of sales. Um, which seems like a simple concept, but is not the
Well,
norm.
it's actually like what you just said as the one piece of advice: total support for your VP sales is usually not what we get. We usually get
No,
total pressure, right? And that's
right.
generally how we're led, is just pressure, 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 pressure.
And I would say he also did a good job of you can't like insulate yourself from the pressure totally, right? But
Of course.
he didn't like he wasn't like we didn't get into a board meeting and he's like, yeah, just yeah, Brendon, go,
Yeah, and I think some CEOs are good at making it feel like the pressure's on both of us rather than the
yeah.
pressure's on me.
Well, I think the
And that's a
fact that
big difference.
Jason had had been a founder before, he had jobs and stuff, right? And he had, had success and failure. So he had, there was a experience and context. And so, with a lot of founders, they don't have it. They don't
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
they don't have a lot of experience. They don't have, like they don't have, how would you know, right? How could you know what is good, great, or indifferent? Um, they don't know, right? And that's I know that one of the things you want to talk about is like consulting. That was one of the reasons what sort of drove me into consulting was not drove me.
That's
into,
a good
like,
transition, by the way. Let's
it was
dive into
one of
that.
the super appealing parts of it was like, hey, I can just tell the truth all the time. Right. And if anyone's ever been a VP of sales, has been in many positions where you're like, well, I could tell you the truth, but I don't think that's what you want to hear. So what should I
and
tell
I'll
this?
tell you, man, that's been the nail in my coffin is like, I just like, I say the truth, man, every time. I really do. Like whether you want to hear it or not.
And
I know, like,
that's the pro. Yeah. If you're going to run sales in a startup or a growth company, there's no truth, right? It's just like, in reality, right? It's just like, yeah, like I'd like to go do this over here, right? Like, do you know that you're going to do it exactly the way it's just,
you
right?
never
There's
know.
so many,
no one knows.
there's so many moving parts and there's so many, like,
it's a game
just,
of testing and iterating, and that's all it is.
And so, yeah, I would say that's, with founders as a advisor or consultant, I just tell them the truth. And I've been like, yeah, I'm like, hey, I know that you feel great about what you're doing right now, but this is a weak spot right here. And if you don't get serious about it, it's going to fuck you. Right.
Yeah.
And then this is with one founder, I won't say who it is. And I said, and by the way, I don't think you have any real, you're going to tell me you agree with me right now, but you don't have any resolution around that. Right. You don't have, right. You don't mean it. And so in a year, we're going to come back to this and you're going to be like, God damn, right. I wish I had taken that seriously then, And he's like, wait, so you're telling me that I'm being dishonest with myself? I said, yes, you're being dishonest with yourself, right? I said, I'm not going to freaking bullshit you, man. Like, I don't care. You don't want to work with me? Fine. Like, I'll go do something else tomorrow. But like, if you don't want to hear the truth, like we shouldn't work together anyways, right? Because I'm not doing you much of a service.
And I think that's why they end up hiring the VPs of sales in times where maybe you shouldn't, and you should use a consultant because they just tell you what you want to hear.
It also makes them want you and I more, right? When we tell them that, right?
Say that again.
It also makes them want you and I more, right?
Oh,
as
yes,
advisors and consultants, when we tell them the truth. But then if they hire us full time, we're probably going to stop telling the truth at some point, no matter how much experience you have, right?
Because you just have an agenda that you have to get done at a certain point.
The minute it becomes like a political decision around like, do I want to level with you or not? And that's why, like, Revenue Collective, Sam Jacobs, who's a very good friend of mine, and I was, Sam and I talked a lot about that, sort of even before he started doing Revenue Collective. That's such a powerful concept, right? Because, sort of the aspect of community and like, because we've all been in the same shit, right? On some level. And if you're doing it for growth companies or startups and you've done it and been successful and failed, like it's so different than like, I was at Microsoft or Salesforce or wherever else. Right. So anyways, it's a shared, sort of shared spirit, I think.
Got it. How much more time do you have? I wanted to touch on two more things.
As long as you want.
All right. So I was going to say, if we want to skip over Talkdesk, we can, but do you want to touch a little bit on what that experience was like? You were there for, I think, a little over a year.
Yeah, I was there. So Talkdesk was, obviously, I think, I don't know if you know Tiago, who's the founder and the CEO. So it was I was like the first really employee in the United States.
Based in Portugal, right? Mostly.
Yeah, based in Portugal. And when I joined there, actually the support cloud, what is now broadly referred to as support cloud, was considered to be like the, biggest loser space on earth.
Really?
Oh yeah. It was, you've heard of Five9, right?
Oh yeah.
Five9's worth $10 billion now, I think, or something. I think their market cap was like 250 million at that point, right?
Wow.
And so I went to Talkdesk. Jason invested as the first investor, so we kind of did that.
That's how you got the intro.
And Jason was like, "Yeah, he's like, one of the problems is like, it's like investing. You're paying sort of a premium to buy a house in a bad neighborhood, kind of thing, right?" When you talked about sort of the comps in the space. And it's interesting to see how that space has evolved just in 5-6 years, right? It's now,
It's enormous.
Talkdesk is worth over 3 billion, of which I'm obviously pretty excited about.
Yeah.
And you have other company, Five9's worth 10 billion. RingCentral's worth what, 40 billion?
It's
right?
Ring Central is a behemoth, man. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
And so, yeah, it's just, at that point when we came in, we were like, that was not an easy sell.
Well, the product wasn't that good back then, right? Because I used it, so I remember it's come a long way.
Yeah, one of our early customers was Zenefits, where Sam Bond was the CRO and all that stuff. And so, as a friend, and they rolled it out, and it just didn't work. The phones didn't work, and we were like, we spent all this time like trying to figure out why it wasn't working and all that stuff. And Tiago's a good friend, so I'm comfortable talking about this. He's just like, what can you do? The phone doesn't work, right? Like,
you're giving me flashbacks, man. I had all these same problems at AirCall. It was like,
and so myself and this guy, Paul Donati, was my first sales hire. Is one of my best friends, and he's obviously excited they're worth 3 billion now, but Paul and I, after this thing, right, and we're like, okay, we're selling sort of essentially a cloud phone, right? We're selling a voice-enabled platform.
There weren't even names for it really at the time.
And we're like, hey, buy this product, buy this sort of call center in the cloud. By the way, the phone doesn't work.
When I started at AirCall,
we're like, the phone doesn't work, dude. Like, we're selling you a product in the cloud, call center in the cloud. And literally the one thing that has to work, which is the damn phone, it doesn't work.
People don't realize like cloud phones are basically a hack, right? Like the internet was not designed to like process phone calls. And like when I started at AirCall, the first thing I noticed was that nobody cold calls and they're only just sending emails.
By the way, the phone does work now for Talkdesk.
Yes. And I will say that it does work very well at AirCall as well. But it's a journey to build those platforms. And it takes a lot of trial and error and we both joined during that time, it sounds like.
Yeah. And so we grew exceptionally fast in that time. And then, Tiago, we were in Mountain View at that point. So I live in Los Gatos, for anyone listening, which is in peak valley times, right? Commute times is like a 3.5 hour round trip commute to San Francisco. And so I sort of told Tiago in the beginning, I said, because he was recruiting me to do this. And I was like, not really sure how long I want to do this. I certainly probably don't want to do this for 4 years.
So I think you were commuting really far, right?
Yeah. And I said, I'll give you a year, maybe 2. And he's like, okay. And I said, and then he's like, and then we were like, we're probably going to move to San Francisco at some point. And I said, then I'll give you a year, maybe 2, or when we move to San Francisco.
Right.
And so that was kind of really the city. It's ironic. Everybody was moving to San Francisco at that point, back in like 2015, 2016. Now everybody's moving out of San Francisco, right? So, but yeah, and so it was fun, and it was a great experience, challenging, super challenging, but fun. And we built an amazing team. Like that team, that's the best sort of founding sales team I've ever built.
So you remember Spencer?
Of course, yeah.
Spencer was he sold me Talkdesk when I was at Doctor.com.
Yeah, I hired Spencer and Frank Golden and Chris Rudigrap, who's now at Sendoso, was one of our AEs. So there's I think there's 4 or 5 VPs of sales just off of that first 10 hires.
That came out of there. Isn't that awesome to see that?
Yeah, that's really like the biggest reward.
Yeah.
Beyond money and equity and all that, but like that's the biggest reward, right? Is seeing those people.
It's so cool. I see people that I trained sales.
It's seeing them go on to great success and then taking credit for their success. Just kidding.
Well, we can do it right now. It's okay.
No, but that's the best part of that's the best part of the job. And that was like, Talkdesk, that became my approach was everyone I want to hire, I want to have that kind of ambition and drive, which a lot of VPs of sales will tell you they don't want people like that because they think they're heads in the clouds. They're not focused on executing today. But that's now obviously I haven't really done it full time, although I am now. I'm now a CEO for my own startup, but
you're hitting these transitions perfectly on cue. So I was going to say, let's talk about CoSell. So I'm excited about this. I mean, when you mentioned it to me, it was, one of those, I would say top 3 for the year moments where I'm like, why didn't I think of that, kind of, right? You get those a few times a year, and this was one of them. 'Cause it's so friggin' obvious.
Yeah.
But like, no one's doing anything about it. Do you want to explain what it is?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, right? It's trying to drive our go-to-market motion more around sort of introductions, referrals, warm introductions through people we know and through people that know our prospective customers, instead of through, cold calls, cold emails, et cetera, et cetera. That's the general thought process around it.
So is the concept, let me ask, because I think I understand it, but let me ask in my sort of, 4th grade reading level, sort of, let's say I'm trying to sell air call, right? And I'm trying to get in touch with prospects, and I know that I want to go after, we have a great integration with Zendesk, and I want to go after all these Zendesk customers. And normally what my team would do is build a list of them and cold outreach. And so is the idea here that I can bring that list into CoSell.io, cross-reference it against other lists, find those mutual overlaps, and facilitate introductions.
Yeah. So you can basically, with Zendesk, you guys can sort of connect and find out where do our customer ecosystems overlap and intersect. And that's the general idea behind it, right? Is that there's now so many companies that are running a parallel race with you.
Yeah.
That aren't competing for the same destination. And so it just doesn't make any sense for us to be like, trying to do it alone when we have other people. There's thousands of companies that sell to CROs and market and CMOs and VPs of support, and that are not competing for the same dollars that you are. And so what if we said, hey, like, what if I knew where my prospective customer intersected with Zendesk existing customers, and vice versa? Although obviously for air call, right, there's a lot more in it for you than there is for Zendesk, obviously, right? And that's part of the complexity of it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just so hard right now. There's just so much noise, and there's so much. 10 years ago, the demand was expected to be owned by marketing almost entirely. 10, 15 years ago, 15 years ago for sure. Now it's almost entirely owned by sales.
And I hate it because it really should not. It's not the way it's supposed to be.
No. And so sales, and you've been pitched many jobs, as have I. And I guarantee you, whether you admit it or not, you're like, how many leads a month do you have? And they're like, none. And you're like, okay, cool.
That's why I loved air call, man. It was all inbound when I started.
Yeah.
We're swimming in leads.
And so increasingly, because marketing, nobody gets to be Salesforce in 1999 again, right? Where you're a single solution, really almost the only SaaS company on earth competing against one other company. Now there's just so much noise. So you have the customers and the buyers have so much noise, and everybody's sort of brute forcing it the same way. That's what we call brute force outreach, Sales Loft, Zoom Info.
It is. And it's got to change. That's why this is such a breath of fresh air. Because
so I know Manny at Outreach well. I'm friends with Manny. I'm friends with Kyle at Sales Loft as well. And I think you should do that, right? That's like table stakes. That's not going to go away.
Yeah. It's like cold calling 10 years ago. You just have to do it all.
But like, it's not enough, right? It's not enough. And so if you can take just a little bit of pressure off of that model, right? Because it's like a powder keg, right? It's like there's so much wrapped up in that playbook. And if it's off just like 2%, you're fucked.
Right.
It's just not, you're like, yeah, well, it's like a what if scenario. What if 10 things all broke just right for us, right? Maybe we could, freaking get out from under. And that's not, you don't want to build a company that way. It has to be easier than that. And so introductions convert like 200x to, infinitely higher rates.
Yeah.
Right. They close. There's less, there's less pressure. There's less, you're not in.
It's a warm intro. It's always going to be better.
And it cuts through the demand creation part, right? And when everything you're doing is about not just, sort of solving a need or solving demand, but creating demand, it's just a rock that, there's very few ever. And
it allows you also to be more strategic, which I really like, right?
Exactly. And it's the concept of like scorched earth, right? It's like you only get to scorch the earth one time, right? And then then you're just coming back in and you're like, hey, dude, like there's nothing left. I'll scorch it again,
Right.
And so that's the idea. And like, it's a behavioral change. It's a huge change in behavior. And so, and that's why, to me, that's the most interesting companies are changing behavior through software. Yeah. And it's really, to me, it's the most important thing I've done in my career. And it's the one thing that I felt like, hey, like I'm willing to accept the consequences here, right? First off, I'm the founder and CEO, right? So, it's on me and on our team. But the second part is like, I'm okay with, I think I'm going to be successful. I think I have a track record of it. I feel like I'm right? But obviously in the early days of a startup, right, you're constantly going through this.
It all comes down to execution, which I think you've got obviously all the knowledge, all the experience, all the resource. You got everything you need to make it happen. I'm curious to dive in a little bit on the bigger vision, right? So does it go beyond just introductions? Because once I start thinking about it, I could see this being just a whole platform for that entire interaction. When I think back, we did a lot of co-selling at Aircall with our integration partners, but that actual sales process was really messy and really challenging. And so we would be in situations, to give you a scenario here, we'd be in situations where we have a prospect that we're trying to get on Aircall. In order for them to buy Aircall, they also need to pick like a CRM or a ticketing desk. So they're shopping for both and they need to play together, right? And so that's where we end up co-selling quite often. We'll be with Zendesk or Front or whatever, any of these. And then we're trying to close the deal together. And those deals I've seen become very, very messy. You end up with a salesperson who's kind of blaming the other team. Oh, he's not trying hard enough to close it, so now I can't close it, and now he won't answer the phone. All this sort of stuff. Is there a world where this platform can make that collaboration easier?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's not just about, there's obviously like finding out where these overlaps exist in a super easy way, but then there's the collaboration of actually like co-selling together, right?
Right.
And really, it's like the spaces that exist today. I would say the incumbent. There's not a lot of companies in this space, but the companies that have been here have really approached this entirely as like a partner enablement solution, right?
That makes sense.
And I don't believe that personally, right? Because I don't believe that this can be a siloed, like partner enablement, but not sales type scenario, and also not. You can't just be sales and not the partner side, right? So I feel like there's this conjoining road where both sides are going to come together here, because the opportunity is massive, right? But the way that it's been done, you have, you've been around enough to know, right? There's usually some friction between the partner side and the sales side, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that
so the sales side is saying. Yeah, the sales side is saying, "What the hell do you do?"
Yep,
and
exactly.
The partner side is saying, "You don't value me enough." Yeah. So, like, I don't want to do anything.
And they end up operating in silos, from what I've seen.
Yeah, and so
even when they try not to, it kind of just gravitates back to that.
Right, and so the spaces that exist today, the company sort of incumbent solution is really just trying to. Really just sort of optimize the partner silo, right? So it's like a partner manager in a corner that's now trying to drive this sort of secret garden of leads, right, through partners.
Yeah.
And it actually has to be co-selling, right? It has to be salespeople selling together, salespeople that can see where their target accounts overlap. Obviously, you and I both know Scott Leese and and others, right? Scott's been a huge proponent of late of like the full stack salesperson, right? Like you can't just have your SDR as the only people doing prospecting.
Agreed.
And so I feel like something like this helps facilitate that, right? Because I don't think you do want your AEs, blasting 1,000 emails a day, 1,000.
Well, and they just won't do it. It's an uphill
Yeah.
battle pushing them.
But when you
it.
can say, hey, here's 50 accounts where we have overlapping relationships, and you're with AirCall and I'm with Talkdesk. I don't know if that,
I could
Talkdesk.
see my top AEs wanting to invest time in that.
Yeah, it's a gift, right?
Yes.
And it's how do I to me that's how should sales orgs do it moving forward? And this is how, right? And so,
hey man, how can people get involved? You just launched, right? So it's early.
Yeah.
What's the current standing and how do people learn more and get on the platform?
Yeah. So we've raised a $2 million seed round from SaaStr and Pivot North. We have
Jason's doubling down his investment on you, huh? Or tripling down.
Or he felt enough guilt to participate if he didn't do it, So either way, it worked out. And so we have about almost 15 paid customers. We're not giving it away, and so that's sort of been
is it one of those things where, like Tinder, like the less people it's on it, the less value there is for people, or is there value for the immediate?
There's definitely a network effect, right? So if you have 0 partners, there's generally 0 value, right? You have to have at least one partner. If you have one partner, right, in my opinion, there's enough value to pay for it, right? So if you even have just a single partner on, and most people start with one partner, right?
And do you have to convince your partner to do it too in order for that to work?
Yeah, you would need one partner that wants to co-sell with you, essentially, right?
Got it. And so they will pay you as well, right? So both companies
they do now, and so we don't have everything nailed as far as the long-term model, but so far, our approach has been, hey, this is, even if it's one partner, you should, there's a lot of value in it, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and you should pay for that. And there is a natural viral loop in it, right? In that you have, if AirCall creates a sort of a hub, so we call them hubs or private networks or whatever you want to call it, and AirCall invites 3 partners in. Well, those 3 partners that's 3 new leads hypothetically for us, right?
Right.
And so you can add partners; it doesn't cost them anything. Right?
And are you facilitating that process? So if I'm AirCall and I'm like, all right, I want to get on this, and we have 50 partners and I want to get all of them on it, can I just tell you, hey, can you try to get our partners on, or do we have to go figure that out?
Yeah, it's usually sort of a combination. So sometimes you have partners that are like, where you can just be like, hey, go there, and they go there, that type of thing. Or sometimes we get involved and help, sort of educate them, that kind of thing. So. And we're going to build sort of partner sort of recommendation piece into it, right? So people will know who's potentially available to partner. But yeah, it's we view it as, this is going to be in 5 years, everyone will be doing this on some level. And those that don't do it will be at a fundamental strategic disadvantage in the market, because you're not selling one-on-one anymore. You're selling 1-on-3, 1-on-4, 1-on-5.
You guys are going to have an enormous amount of data. You're going to get, I feel like you're going to have a lot of good data. I imagine you're tracking that type of stuff, like successful connections and all that stuff.
Like introductions made, introductions accepted, all that kind of stuff.
And then I think you asked about you're plugging into the CRM, so you can track revenue, success.
We are, although we do allow you to not, if you're like, we don't want to connect with CRM, you can upload like a CSV or whatever, right? Where you're not, it's a more controlled data set.
Right.
But yeah, I think the bigger vision is, there's a lot right now. There's so much to do that, we're not. There's
You're thinking about the next 6 months right now.
There's a lot of paths. One of the things we talk about a lot is sort of democratizing sort of sales intelligence and knowledge, right? So that's one of the things we talk about, which is like, hey, like, you know, you have sort of the partner play, and then you also have sort of super, like, one rep can be a super hub, right? Just one super well connected rep. And so, you know, and there's obviously there's what's the value exchange and all that kind of stuff, right? That's important. But like,
Yeah.
you know, I can get, you know, like, I know like 500 CROs, right? Like, that's valuable, right? And like, most salespeople only have value to their current employer, right? So like, you know, I work at Aircall, I work at Talkdesk, I work at Salesforce,
Right.
and so like we have talked a lot about, like, you know, what if we can sort of help match up the companies that want the customers that I can introduce them to, right? Which, you know, again, that's a bigger picture thing. It's certainly not what we're focused on in the short term. But
Yeah, I see
like,
you're saying it could almost evolve to like salespeople kind of own their own profile and can sort of bring it with them where they go.
Kind of, right?
Yeah.
Which is like, I can be a salesperson and I don't even need to have a full-time job, right?
Right.
I can just be somebody that's facilitating, you know,
Oh, that's
introductions
interesting
to people.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's like, hey, if I know the CEO for Price, or the CMO for Price Waterhouse, or, you know, the CIO for GE, like, the world would be a better place if some people were getting introduced through me. Again, obviously assuming that I wanted to introduce them.
Like a corporate matchmaker almost.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things we've talked about. That's a broader picture, but that is something that we've talked about. So I don't know how easy or hard that would be to build. I would imagine,
I mean,
like,
that would be like, imagine that someday that the platform is just almost doing that for you, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's an element of like, this is a natural resource that you don't want to burn through, right? And that's one of the reasons why we really cap the number of introductions that customers can ask for, because we don't want them.
Sense. Yeah.
There's no scorched earth play there. And
yeah, if SalesLoft limited how many customers they would have, it'd be working a lot better, probably, right?
Yeah, so we have that conversation with people. They're like, well, how do I, like, you know, I want to upload like everything into CSV and then I want to blast out. We're like, no, that's not what we're doing here. And if that's, you know, if you can't get your arms around that, we understand. Well, you know,
you want to be a strategic tool, not a mass market tool. Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, it's like almost in the same way that, you know, Outreach and SalesLoft were kind of revolutionary when they launched, right?
Well, that's what I mean. Like, it's so different. Like, they took, you know, sort of the Aaron Ross model and they just made it easier to do. But now it's almost too easy that too many people are doing it.
I mean, yes, everybody's gotten, this email is like almost the same as like 10 others I've gotten, right?
And you know, when you get it, like, I'm going to get the voicemail tomorrow.
Or like, why is everybody cold calling me at 3:38 p.m., right?
Yeah.
Like,
you know, right when you're
does somebody know that that's a good time to call me? Yeah. And I just don't believe, you know, like all the people walking around that beat their chest on LinkedIn about how their teams made 20,000 cold calls today, right? I think they're full of shit, right?
They're full of shit, and the cold calls are not.
They're full of shit, and nobody picked up the goddamn phone. Like, just, I'm done with it. You know, shut the fuck up. Like, you know, if that's the best we can do, then like, and I guess that's what I feel around CoSell. That's why I am so passionate about it. I'm just done with the other way.
I love it, man, because it really is like, it's just, I feel like that change that we need, because there just hasn't been anything that's really changed in the world of prospecting.
No,
since SalesLoft and Outreach, right? Since
SalesLoft,
I mean, predictable
basically
revenue,
it's the phone. In the last 150 years, there was the phone. And then email / outreach SalesLoft. That's it.
and LinkedIn, but
yes,
the messages
LinkedIn
on LinkedIn, I think, are probably the least effective out of
anything. I mean, obviously, I love LinkedIn. You know, I'm always going to be a LinkedIn Kool-Aid drinker to some degree. LinkedIn could have done this, right? They could have done this.
There's a lot of things LinkedIn could have done. Yeah,
solved, and they didn't. They watched the pitch go by on this one. And
did you pitch this to them?
Yes.
Yeah,
I did. I won't get into that, but like, yes.
No, but good for you for making it happen on your own, though.
Yeah, I mean, really, the first iteration of this idea, which has been like an 8-year process, but it was just hard to figure out how to do this without needing to touch LinkedIn at some point, like the
Right.
LinkedIn API. And obviously, we've figured out how to do this. And my co-founder, Pete Ryan, who's my co-founder, when he pitched it to me, I was like, "Jeez, you kidding me, man? I've been talking about this for 8 years, literally 8 years."
Oh, what? He
And
came back around and pitched you your own idea?
No, well, he had founded this company years ago, this like sales recruiting platform called Hire.
Okay.
And it didn't get there, right? And I'd been pitching for him. I'm like, you should just create this sort of like a bravado sort of model, right? Like this network for salespeople, almost kind of a revenue collective-ish concept. And so, and he didn't do that. And then years later, he came back around. He was like, "Hey, I'm working on this thing," and he told me, I was like, "Yeah, that's it. That's why. That's how you do this, and you don't need LinkedIn anywhere."
Yeah.
You don't need it. LinkedIn's cut out of the deal on this. And so and then I was like, yeah, if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it. And so
are you technically still positioned in a place where LinkedIn could want to purchase it someday?
I don't know. Like, I don't know where LinkedIn, LinkedIn is obviously Microsoft. I don't know what.
It's hard to know what they're even up to these days. Like,
let me put it this way. Salesforce offered LinkedIn, what, $30 billion, right, to buy them? Or Salesforce, sorry. Salesforce offered LinkedIn $30 billion that they really didn't have at that point. I know for a fact that this concept is pretty important to Salesforce. Like, Salesforce has been trying to figure out how do we either back into or create some sort of graph or network effects and all that kind of stuff. It's been really, I think probably behind closed doors, the thing that has burned in Benioff more than any other concept.
Why the heck hasn't he done it? Like, they have what you need to do it, right? I mean, the data is in Salesforce.
Yeah, I mean, Salesforce doesn't launch new verticals, really, right? I mean,
they
Salesforce
just buy stuff, right?
By the way, I said SalesLoft 3 times, even though, like Kyle,
I know what you mean.
They're not Salesforce yet. But Salesforce, right? They don't typically. If you've ever been in a huge tech company, like when I was at Adobe, you very quickly learn that the ability to pivot is like, no, they don't pivot, right? They acquire. They may launch a product like Chatter or something else, right? But like, they try to solve.
I think you were the one who said like they acquire things and it's like what happens to them after I've seen it so many times, like
too many times maybe, right? Is that like, and so, yeah, I think for like, they haven't done this, I think is the point. So like, yeah, I think if we can certainly this should be an interesting concept to a few people. I mean, obviously we're trying to build something for the long haul, 20, 30 years. And, but like, yeah, if we execute, it's going to be interesting to some people, whether that's Salesforce or LinkedIn or Oracle or whatever, right? Because, if we got acquired by Oracle, I always wanted to live in Austin. Just kidding. That's just a joke. I have a lot of friends in Austin, by the way. So
I thought about moving there. I did, but I don't think I could handle the heat.
You can't move to Austin at least until I've come out to our Jersey Shore party, right?
I'll be there. I'm moving next week, man. I'm out of this city. I'll have an actual bedroom rather than a living room, kitchen room, dining room, bedroom. What you're seeing right here. But,
I'm excited because I need to, getting out to Jersey Shore and living the Jersey Shore experience for me, even if it's on a vacation, is definitely a bucket list item.
It's there. Everyone now thinks that the whole Jersey Shore is like what you see on TV. It's actually very like as you go down the shore, you go through these very different cultural like things. The spot I'm in is right above Asbury Park and Seaside, and that's where it's like very much like the TV show. But
I'd imagine it's probably nothing like Jersey Shore, just like most of New Jersey is probably nothing like Sopranos, right, or something like that.
Exactly right. Yeah. It's actually just a beautiful beach, a little boardwalk.
Yeah, I've spent that first job recruiting. The company was based in New York, so we'd come back to New York.
Oh, okay.
One of the co-founders had like apartments and lofts all over New York and New Jersey.
Yeah.
So we would stay in Hoboken. And we
Hoboken's
loved
nice.
Hoboken.
Jersey's
we were
underrated,
like,
man. And people in New York love to hate on Jersey, but it's
we
'cause
liked, honestly,
only-
this is back in 2000, 2001. We liked Hoboken more than New York.
Yeah, Hoboken's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very similar to, it's like city like,
Yeah.
but
Of course,
everybody
you know,
knows the New Jersey Turnpike, which smells awful, so they just think that that's all of New Jersey. But it's
most
actually a
people
beautiful
don't know that New Jersey is like 15 minutes on the path or something, right? Like
Yep.
it's
Yeah,
right there. It's closer to.
I actually lived in Harrison, New Jersey, which is at the PATH station, and it was 20 minutes. You just ride the PATH train and you're right in. But hey man, let's wrap this up. We've ran on for a while. This was a lot of fun for everyone who's listening. CoSell.io. Go there, tell your CEOs, your CFOs, your VPs of sales, everyone, get them involved, get them on there. There's nothing.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to reach out, I'm just Brendon at CoSell.Brendon at CoSell.io. You can look me up on LinkedIn. Yeah. Definitely this was fun.
Likewise, man.
You and I share a lot of beliefs.
We do. And next season we'll get into some tactical stuff. We'll have you back on. We'll dive into some cool stuff. But hey man, enjoy the rest of the year. Happy holidays. Stay healthy, do the social distance, the mask, all that stuff, and be well.
And the vaccine, right?
You got plans to get it yet? When's it getting out there?
Yet.
No.
Not yet. I don't even know. It's not available
yet to us, right?
I do know some like nurses and doctors that have gotten it.
Good the last feedback. So they're still alive. Have you seen all these memes of like people are like, they're like, just had the COVID vaccine, and they're like doing all weird shit. Like, there's so much stuff going on the internet.
I want this to be over, because as much as I love working out of my cottage, I would like to be like, at least have the option to like maybe go into an office and not be like,
I do miss.
I'd love to go interact with people, but I don't want to die.
Honestly, that's why I said I'm moving to the shore. Something I would have never done in my life, go live on a beach. But I'm like, look, I can run this business from my place and it's close to my family. So I get to go see them. I'll be 30 minutes from my whole family, nieces, nephews, everyone. I'll have a car again. So I can like be a real human and like.
Are you from New Jersey?
Originally, yeah.
What part of New Jersey?
Edison, so Central Jersey.
Yeah.
So that where I'm going is a little bit south of that. But yeah, I'm excited to go back because I haven't lived there since I was 18. I moved to Rhode Island for college, stayed there for 8 years, then came to.
Where'd you go to college?
Johnson and Wales in Providence.
Nice.
Yeah. So, so this is like me going back home. I'm turning 35. I'm still single. And I kind of like, I thought like, I'm not going home until I'm married, right? Then I'll probably buy a house in New Jersey. That's like always been the plan. But now I'm like with quarantine and everything here, like you can't date in New York right now. It's like, were you going to go on a mask date? Like, so I'm like, at least for the next year, I just should go be closer to my friends and family. Cause like the dating scene is just dead, So
there was an SNL like skit a few years ago. It was like one of their sort of fake movie trailers. And it was like based on one of those stories about like the guy that's dating the sick girl, And the setup was that she had Ebola. And so they're dating and she's like, they're both in a hospital, but he has some lesser disease. And he's like, what do you have? And she's like, Ebola. And he's like, oh, Jesus. Right.
Like, and that's so what life is like now.
They're going on dates and they have like full like hazmat gear on, and it's pretty funny.
I was talking to this girl the other day. She got all mad at this guy because she met a guy on the streets, they have a nice conversation. And he goes, do you mind take your mask down so I could see what you look like? And she's like enormously offended, but I'm like, it's kind of a valid question. Like
I obviously live in the suburbs, and I was getting gas the other day, and this woman who went to the same school, whose kids went to the same school as my sons last year. She's like, hey, Brendon, she had a mask on. She had sunglasses on. And she's like, how you doing? Like, how are your kids doing? She's talking about her kids. And I was like, yeah, definitely. And then she drove away. And I was like, I don't know who that is.
Who the heck was that?
And I went back to my wife and I'm like, yeah, this woman, she's got, she has 2 kids that are our son's age. And we were trying to figure out, cause I didn't know she had a mask on and sunglasses.
It's so weird. And you can't tell if people are smiling or
she knew who I was though. So, it always makes you feel a little better when somebody knows who you are and you don't know who they are.
It's better than the other way around.
That's enough to get you through a day, right there. So, but yeah, like that'll be, I would imagine that'll be a dating scene. People will be like, by the way, I've already gotten the vaccine.
Well, yeah. That's what people were talking about. Like, is there going to be like an app that's going to show like the proof that you're, like when you sign up for Tinder, you're going to show your vaccinations and stuff. Although I'll be honest, there are other diseases that probably be more useful for on Tinder.
Yes.
All right. This is how you know we've come to the end of the show. Probably
more risk, maybe even, right? Like if you're on Tinder, yeah.
When CoSell gets acquired, we're going to start a Tinder that puts all of your medical records for the public to see.
Oh yeah, trust me. Yeah,
I got a lot of by disease. That's actually not a bad idea.
And by the way, I'm going to leave it here. There was one question you asked that I don't think we got to, which is like, how do you, advice on like how to handicap startups and stuff like that, right?
Yes.
Like, you should be you should be thinking of your own ideas, right? Things that are interesting to you, whether those are things that you do or found at some point, but like that'll help. What's interesting to you, like, and you can't always work for a company that's personally interesting, right? Or aligns with something.
And this was just so for everyone who's listening, the question that he's referring to is what's advice for how to pick the right startup to work for?
Yeah. Pick something that you believe in, right? That you're passionate about. And that may limit the number of companies that you could work for or might work for, but that's pretty good. Like have an opinion about, like what is interesting to you? What are problems that you think are worth solving? Like
what about trade-offs, right? Like the kinds of questions I get from people will be like, hey, I'm looking at these two different jobs. One of them's like this really good product, but like maybe the team's not as good. The other one, like I really like the team, product's not as good. Like, do you have general rules of thumb with those types of things, or it's case by case?
I would say, yeah. I mean, who the VP of sales is a big variable, right? Yeah. Because is it somebody that you trust, or you feel like you can trust? Is it somebody that you feel like's going to be around, right?
Right.
So like, there's scenarios where it's like, oh, like I like this guy or this woman, but I'm not sure, I'm not sure they're going to be around in like 6 or 9 months, right?
Right.
And those are variables that can change everything for any salesperson. So I would say, like that was at Talkdesk, the team I built, a big part of the, draw was the biggest draw was they wanted to work for me because I had, I'd sort of created that perception, true or not, or fair or not, that I was a great person to work under.
But that feels really good, right? Walking into a role like that, having already proven yourself before you even start.
Yeah. And that was a big deal, right? It was like, they viewed it as, I want to work for Brendon. Brendon can help.
That really saves you a lot of time in the first 90 days because like going in, normally like it's first you got to figure out who you're going to keep on the team, right? And who's going to be in what role. Yeah. And then
I would rather
respect. You already had that.
If I were a founder, and I am now, but like, and I was hiring a VP of sales, I would rather hire somebody younger and less experienced if they had people ready to come with them that were good. That I've, so there's the number of VPs of sales you and I have both met that have been around and maybe look good on paper, but nobody, for some reason, nobody wants to work for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want that. I wouldn't hire that person, right? Because now they're competing for talent against everybody else that has seemingly no network, right? And so
you want the VP of sales who not only has people that will follow them, but they know exactly how many months it is until they're no longer legally restricted from hiring them from their last company, right? Like those are the people really have people.
One great benefit of California for those
they can't do that, right?
No, there's all those are inapplicable.
I actually don't think it's very enforceable. I think I could probably break that rule and get away with it, but
in California it's overtly unenforceable, right? So it is. It's not even considered, right?
Oh, so you've never had to deal with that. Yeah, usually when I leave, you got about 12 months, but I just do it out of respect, honestly. But
yeah, I mean, you definitely don't want to be like the person. Yeah, and so like, if you want to be that VP of sales, you should be developing potential hires that are not just people that currently work for you, right? They could be, you have to be doing that all the time. And like, I've had to, the people I hired at Talkdesk, only one of those people were people that work for me at Echosign, right? Because they were all VPs now. Like,
right.
So that it was like, I couldn't hire Sam Bond again or any of these people. They're all running sales orgs elsewhere.
No, I mean, I have my people that like, I always keep in touch with, that they know that I'm always trying to bring them to the next place.
And that's an underrated thing. Like, it
really, really is.
You need to be, whether you're consulting or not, or like, you need to be constantly having like your next team sort of.
Well, it significantly reduces your chances of failure by being able to work with people that you've worked with before.
It's a de-risking element, right? It's like, like obviously the odds are stacked against any one startup always, but like if you got to chip away at that
a little bit.
If your first 5 salespeople are all like highly probable to have some level of success, that significantly de-risks the whole scenario, right?
Yeah, and you know that you can just work with them, right? Like you understand them as a human, because we all know like interviews say nothing, right? The person who shows up on Monday is always a different person than was in the interview, almost always, right? And so like after you've worked with them and you know what they're like at their worst moments, it makes a big difference. So like,
and they also like when you move from like that sort of founding team to like, let's sort of create a model, like a sort of model of sort of characteristics, and it becomes less about a resume and more about a profile. Agreed. Is those people that you brought in help, they're so invaluable to help bring those when you're I think you know what I'm talking about, right? You're hiring people because you can't, not everyone has a resume, the resumes lie all the time, right? So like
the resumes don't mean anything in sales.
Yeah, you're going to start hiring people that are like, they have the right mindset, characteristics. It's more about the raw materials than it is about the resume, sort of beyond that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And they really bring those people along, and you don't have to be sort of the mentor every time is huge to have, sort of out of your first 10 hires, people that can help, they help sort of co-lead,
Yeah, it makes such, because you can trust them, to take care of things when you're not in the room and stuff. Like you just already have so much established, mutual agreements and concepts and theories and trainings and stuff. Like, I got a guy that I desperately want to bring on to, one of the companies I'm consulting with now, just because I know it'll advance us 6 months. Just by getting that one person.
That's a harder close, though, don't you think?
It is. Yes. If he were coming to work directly for me, it'd be easier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now it's like, hey, come work for this company. Hey, so you're going to, well, I'll be around sometimes.
Yeah, he's like, are you going to sign like a 12-month agreement with them? So I know that you're there. And so if I do that, then I might be able to get him. Yeah. So.
Well, I might go full-time at some point. Are you going to go full-time? No.
No. And by the way, there's no chance unless I absolutely have to. People have asked me that, like, are you going to go back full time? And originally I thought I'll probably fall in love with one of these clients and do it. But now I've fallen in love with not having a boss,
Yeah, that was really the same for me, right? I kind of went into it being like, well, maybe I'll do this for like 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
But I don't really, but then you're like, you're constantly like, you look at these startups, you're constantly risk assessing, right? And then it becomes a thing where you're like, you're searching for the reason not to do it.
Yeah.
You're
like,
I
actually feel like I'm more equipped to help startups with the things that I'm great at, which is the very early stage. I actually feel more equipped to help them in a consulting capacity than full-time. I actually think it's better for them. They don't have to worry about when they're going to fire me because it's inevitable anyway, right? Like you don't have to deal with that. You can get all of the benefits without a lot of the risk, and
you as well as for them and for you, right?
Yeah.
So
it goes both ways. Like I have never been happier, honestly, in my entire adult life than I think I've been in the last few months, because I don't have that paranoia of when's that really bad day going to come. Because it just comes, man. It does. Like you've been, I don't want to say lucky because it's not luck, it's hard work, but you also landed in some spots like where things worked out, and it's not like that for most VP roles.
No,
it's usually not a happy ending, and that does not mean you're a bad VP.
Yeah, there's a luck component, right?
Yeah,
and
because a lot of it's out of your control. You're just one piece of the puzzle.
And the luck component, it's when you meet people that don't think it's there's a luck component to it. You're like, yeah, this guy never really did it then, right? Because it's
like you executed. I know there's no question about it. But what was was the timing, the placement, right?
I know some incredible VPs of sales that have never really had that sort of that signature win that I think are better than I am, first off. And I would hire if I was a CEO. I'd be like, I'd go hire that guy. By the way, I'm getting low on my my battery.
No, it's good. We should wrap it up anyway. We're rambling on, but it was a good episode. Lots of good nuggets in here, and let's stay in touch, man.
All right,
remember, CoSell.io. Everybody go check it out. Get your companies on there. I'm going to be pushing people to do it soon.
All right. Sounds
all right, my
thank
man.
You.
Take care.
Right. You too.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Colin Cadmus podcast. Please don't forget, this episode was brought to you by Lessonly. Check out lessonly.com. That's lessonly.com. This episode was also brought to you by Spiff. Check out spiff.com/Colin. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.